Hello, in this demo I will demonstrate how to configure a network with VLANs on layer 2 switches and configure subnets and VLAN communication on layer 3 switches and routers. Here you can see the VLAN color-coded to see what device belongs in which VLAN. VLAN 100 is pink, VLAN 200 is purple, 300 green, 400 yellow, 500 red. And along with that, I left the IP address next to each device and each interface, so we will configure that later. I have not configured anything yet, so I will do so in this video, and I will leave a PKT file of this lab at this very moment for you to download in the link for you to follow along. First, we're going to configure the PCs with the IP address and default gateways and subnets on both sides. And then we do this layer 2 switches, which we will give the VLANs to the desired ports, and on the layer 3 switch we will give the VLANs of the two different ones, VLAN 100 for FAO2, VLAN 200 for FAO1. On the right side, VLAN 300 for FAO1, and for FAO2 it will be a trunk port, so it can communicate with the VLAN 400 and 500. I'll discuss this side a little more when we get there. Right now, let's configure the PC 0. This will be on the 10 network, as you see, the 10.2/24, and the default gateway for this will be this multi-layer switch on FAO2, the 10.254. The default subnet, because this is /24, and it will be 192.168. 10.254. Press enter and it will set. Close it out to the next PC1. Since this is /23, the subnet will be different. 192.168.10.3, and since it's /23, it can't be the default subnet, so it will be 10 or 255.255.254. Press enter, and then 192.168.10.254 for the subnet, or the default gateway. Will be the same one in this network. Press enter, exit out. Now go to the switch. Command line interface. Now we're going to create a VLAN 100 for all three FAO01 through FAO3, and we will clear that now. T, do int VLAN 100. Turn it on by doing VLAN 100. And now we switch to the interface. FAO1 through 3. We want to do all three of them, so we use the range command. Enter. Do switch port access VLAN 100. You'll turn it on. Do a no shut just in case. Exit out. Write it to memory, and we are done. You can see it's orange because it is in the middle of configuring. Now, moving on to layer 3 switch, we will first create VLAN 100, assign it to the IP address 10.254, and then we will assign it to the port FAO2, and then next we'll do VLAN 200 FAO1 and give it the IP address of 20.254. But before we do any of that, we have to convert this layer 3 switch to an actual layer 3 switch, because right now we're seeing it's only working as a layer 2 switch. So before we do any of that, we have to do const do IP routing command. You have to do this command in order for this switch to function as a layer 3 switch. Press enter, and we're going to create the VLANs now. Int VLAN 100, give the IP address of 192.168.10.254 as shown right here, and give the subnet. Now we're going to turn on the VLAN, do VLAN 100, turn on, switch over to interface FAO2, and give it the VLAN 100. Turn on, no shut just in case, exit. Now we're going to create the VLAN 200 with the IP address 20.254 and assign it to FAO1. Int VLAN 200, IP address 192.168.20.0, enter. Now we're going to switch over to interface of /01 switch port sys VLAN 200, no shut just in case, exit out, and we're done configuring the VLANs to the IP address to the interface. Lastly, we're going to set a static route table for this multi-layer switch. If the switch does not receives a packet from any network and they do not know what to do with it, they will route it in this direction to the router, which is the 192.168.20.1. So we're going to set the static route as IP route 0.0.0.192.168.20.1. But before that, it's the 0, that's the network address. Now we do the subnet before that and press enter. Exit out to show IP route to verify. So we could see that the 10.0 network is directly connected VLAN 100. So we don't see the VLAN 200 turned on at the moment because the router is not turned on. We will do that last step and you'll see the difference. As of now, let's do everything from down here all the way up to the router, and we'll configure the router last. On PC2, we will do IP configuration 40.2, the subnet /24, so the default. And then since we will configure the default gateway as the 40.254 up here, and since there are two IP addresses up here, we're going to give them each a VLAN and set this port to a trunk port so it can communicate with both of these. So I'll explain more later. 68.40.254. Press enter. Here, let's do the same. 192.168.40.3 as we give the IP address down here. Default subnet 192.168.40.254. Press enter. That will configure that computer. PC4, we're going to see that it's on the 50 network because it's on a different VLAN, so we gave it another network. And it's going to be using the 50.254 as a default gateway. 192.50.2. 92.50.254. Press enter. And now, on the layer 2 switch, we will be configuring all four of these interfaces. FAO2 and FAO3 will be VLAN 400, FAO4 will be VLAN 500, and FAO1 will be a trunk port communicating with the layer 3 switch. So we'll first do the trunk port. Do enable conf-t and FAO1 the trunk port, do switch port mode trunk, and you'll see that it is changing because of the orange, and we will wait for that to configure. But in the meantime, we will switch over to the other interfaces and create the VLAN. Let's first create the VLAN 400, turn it on, switch over to the FAO2 and FAO3. Assign the VLAN 300, 400. No shut, just in case. Exit out. Now we do create the VLAN 500 for the 50 network. Int VLAN 500, turn it on. Switch to the interface. No shut just in case. Exit. Exit. And we will write some memory. And that should be the finished configuration for the layer 2 switches. Now, on layer 3, we're going to create the interface for FAO2. We're going to set that as a trunk port. But before we do that, we have to create the VLAN 400 and set that to the 40.254, and then create a VLAN 500 and set that to the 50.254. and make one more for VLAN 300 and set that to 30.254, but actually assign the 300 one to the FA01 interface. First, before we do any of that, we have to convert this to a layer 3 switch through IP routing. Turn that on. And then next we're going to do int VLAN 400, turn it on. Go back to the 400, give the IP address 192.168.40.254, 255.255.255.0. And we do the same thing, but we're going to create the 500 and then give the IP address of 50.254. And after that, we have to turn on the VLAN. So VLAN 500, turn that on. Okay, now let's go to the interface FA02 and make that a trunk port, FA02. It's going to be a different configuration because this is a layer 3 device, so we're going to have to turn on the protocol of .1q, which is also 802.1q, which is just a inter VLAN communication protocol. First, we're going to do switch port trunk encapsulation .1q, press enter, and after that we could do the switch port mode trunk command. Switch port mode trunk, press enter, exit out. Now we will create VLAN 300, assign it the 30.254 address, and then assign it to the FA01. Now let's do int VLAN 300 IP address 2.168.30.254.255. Now we go over to the interface FA01, assign the VLAN, it'll turn on, exit, we got everything, that's memory, and then we do show IP route, just to double check. We see anything coming from the 30 network is directly connected to 300, so everything is verified there. And now, lastly, we will configure the router settings. We will first set each interface to, but before we even do that, we have to set the default route right here. Conf T, and we have to do the default route, IP route 0.0.0, just like we did on the other side, 192.168.30.1. If the switch receives a packet and they do not know what to do with it, it will send it directly to the router right here, the 30.1, which is 30.1 right here. Exit, write to memory. Now we're finished with that. Now with the router, we're going to first set each interface to their desired IP address. So 0/0/0 is 20.1, 0/1 is 30.1. After that, we're going to create the route tables. If we receive something from a network like the 10 network, we will know where to direct it, either left or right. If we receive anything from the 40 network, we will know either to direct it left or right. 50, then it will also direct. So let's first create or set the interface to their IP address. T G 0/0/0. We're going to give the IP address of 192.168.20.1, 55. And because you see this is still red right here, it's because the interface is not turned on. We have to do no shutdown, turn that on, and you see it's green. Next, we will configure the 0/0/1 interface for the 30.1 address. So int gig 0.1 IP address 192.168.30.1 255.0. No shut, turn it on. Okay, exit. Now, since both of these are on at the moment, now we are going to configure the route tables. So we're going to use that formula we did on the layer 3 switches that we used to configure the default routes. It's going to be IP route 192.168. I'll explain this after I type it out. Okay. So what this is essentially saying is if we receive anything, if the router receives anything from the 10 network over here, we will route it back to the 20.254 network interface, which is this layer 3 switch right here. So if this were to ping the router, it would ping up here, go to the router, and the router would know to send it back to the 20.254 over here. Press enter, and that route is set. That's a static route. Now we're going to configure the same one, but for 40 and 50. Do the up arrow for the history. If anything from the 40 network, it reads, we will route it to the 30.254. If anything is coming from this 40 network, route it back to the interface FA01, which is in the VLAN of 30.254. That's what that is saying. Press enter. And we do the same thing for 50. 50 is also on the same path as the 40 network. So then we're going to send it up to the router. If anything sees from the 50 network, route it back to 30.254. Press enter. Exit. Right. To configuration, and now we're going to show IP route. And you could see the static, letter S, make it static. So the static, the first one, anything from the 10 network, we're going to send it back to 20.254, right here. Down here, anything from the 40 network, send it back to the 30.254, 30.254 right here. Anything from the 50 network, send it back to 30.254. So we know that's good. Let's do one final check for everything to make sure that is up and running before we start pinging each other. You can see the VLAN 100 via the 10 network down here, 20 network via 200 over here. Static route is set to go to the 20.1 right here, and we can check the same thing for this. We see 3. We see the static route set, and then see VLAN 300, 400, and 500. So they're all up and running, and they know which network belongs to which network. Now, we're first going to use PC4 and ping the router. GI, or 192.168.30.1. It's going to have at least 1 or 2 errors because it's still figuring the route, and then after that it should have success. So give it some time. There you go, success. And ping again. This was 25% loss, now it's going to be 0% loss. That's always the first time when you're first setting up these devices. Press exit. So now is a good time to show the MAC tables for the switch. Show MAC address table. Press tab to finish it. And you could see that the switch has learned of the FA04 port from here, and they have also learned FA01 from all the other VLANs. It has not learned of FA02 and FA03 yet because these computers have never communicated with the switch so far. I could show you after we use PC3 to ping the router that it's going to add port FA03 because the switch will learn about it. So let's do that. Let's ping the router. As usual, the first one is going to be an error, or not actually. After that, see 0% loss, so that's a success. And if we do the history, we can see now that FA03 is added to the MAC address table of the switch. We do the same thing for PC2. Ping 192.168.30.1. Let's go back to the router or the switch real quick. We don't see an FA02 on here at all because this computer has not communicated with it. So now we're going to demonstrate just it again. Ping from there. Now the switch has learned about it. Let's do the history, and you see FA02 is on here. with the MAC address. Next, we're going to see PC4 communicate with PC2 over here. We're going to ping 192.168.10.2. There should be 2 errors, and it should go to the router, go to the switch, and learn the path. Press enter, and you see it works. Now we're going to try ping 10.20.3 on /23 on a different subnet, and you can see it still works because it's still on the 10 network. 10.3. Give it 1 or 2 tries before it learns the path, and then you see there. We could test on the PCs over here as well to ping the different VLANs. We're going to do 40.2 first. Ping 192.168.40.2. There we go. And then we're going to do 50.2 next. And we're going to do a little more tests just to verify everything. Ping 192.168.10.2 on the same network, and then we could also try it on the VLAN 400. So 40.2. Ping this PC. We'll ping this PC as well. .3. See, that's working. And then lastly, we will do 50.2. 50.2. There we go. Thank you for watching.